Members, this is the appointed time. We have a quorum, so let's start the meeting. This is the 7th day of the Chinese New Year, so let me first of all wish everybody a Happy New Year. Item 1 on the agenda. Information papers issued since the last meeting. The Secretariat has issued 1 information paper since the last meeting. Please refer to the agenda for details. This is a letter dated the 30th of January from Mr. Kingsley Wong requesting to invite the government subvented organizations to attend the panel's meetings. So please note this paper. Item 2. Items for discussion at the next meeting. Please refer to the list of outstanding items for discussion issued by the Secretariat. On the 2nd of February, together with Deputy Ms. Nixie Lam, we had a meeting with the Secretary for the Civil Service and we discussed the work plan for this year. So please refer to the list for the update of items to be discussed. The next regular meeting will be held on the 16th of March at 10:45 a.m. The administration has proposed to discuss 2 items. First, civil service related matters featured in the 2026-27 budget, and second, promotion of a clean civil service. Members, any comments on the proposed items? No, thank you. All right, item 3. An overview of the civil service: establishment, strength, retirement, resignation, age profile, and gender profile. Let's invite the administration to come in. Let us welcome the Secretary. Members, we're joined by Mrs. Ingrid Yang, Secretary for the Civil Service, and Ms. Shirley Lam, Permanent Secretary for the Civil Service, as well as Ms. Eureka Zhang, Deputy Secretary. I will now invite the Secretary to walk us through the paper. Members, if you want to speak, please press the Request to Speak button. Thank you, Chair. Members, let me also wish everybody a Happy New Year. I'd like to, first of all, explain to members that in order for members to get an overview of the civil service, we will, on a regular basis, report to members this overview in relation to establishment, strength, retirement, resignation, age, and gender profile. This paper provides the updated figures as of 2024-25. I'm not going to repeat the details, save to say that the government strives to build a professional and efficient civil service so as to cope with the increasing workload and enhance our quality of service. We also strictly control the civil service establishment such that the overall establishment contained at a level not exceeding that as at the end of March 2021. The current establishment contains 190,000 positions and also 171,000 for the actual strength. We will continue to enhance efficiency through prioritization, internal redeployment, streamlining of work processes, and adopting technology so as to achieve the target of reducing the establishment by 2% each in 2026-27 and 27-28. We also rolled out other measures in terms of recruitment. For example, we've expanded the scope of eligible candidates to those in the penultimate year of study in the university. We also hold major job fairs and other publicity programs to enhance the young people's understanding and interest in civil service positions. We also digitalized the basic law and national security law test degree professional grades in May 2025 so that candidates applying for the positions can take the test at their selected time slots throughout the year. This can help streamline the procedure. As for the new recruits, those under the age of 39 accounted for over 80%. As for age profile, on average, the age profile is lower than that of the labor force of Hong Kong, with the largest age group of being 30 to 39. Now, the education attainment of civil servant applicants also exceeds the average in the workforce. This shows the appeal of civil service as well as our determination to hire those with high caliber. This can help enhance the overall quality of service and efficiency. In terms of gender equality, we have also made achievements. In 2024-25, the overall proportion of female civil servants increased to 48.8%. As for those in the directorate grade, the number of female officers rose from 34.6% to 42.8%. We will continue to adopt management and then in terms of boosting staff morale and grooming talents, so that those who are in the junior positions can take up responsibility at the senior ranks. We also have various commendation schemes, and we will continue to boost staff morale through a multi-pronged approach. We will also help tell good stories of the civil service so as to enhance public understanding of the challenges facing them. That concludes my presentation. 8 members have indicated their wish to speak. I read out the names, starting with Chris Ip, Stephen Ho, Johnny Ng, Lam Chun Sing, Kingsley Wong, Aaron Bok, Len Wai Kong, and myself. I will give each member 4 minutes question and answer. If there is time, I will allow for a second round. We start with Mr. Chris Ip. Right, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Secretary, for introduction. Now, referring to the age profile of civil servants, for those under the age of 40, it's still above the average of the labor force. But for those under the age of 29, those under the age of 29, comparing to 2024, the level in 2025 registered a slight drop. I don't know if this is a sign that those who are younger are not joining the government, and also 40% of new recruits resigned during the probation period in 2024. What about 2025? And what is the proportion of civil servants age 29 or below? Are there measures to retain them? Secretary. Now, for those under the age of 29 joining the civil service, the percentage seemed to be lower than that in the other age group, and that's those above the age of 30. To my understanding, there are 2 reasons. We adopt open recruitment. We recruit the best in this level playing field. And for those who have work experience, they are usually those who are not really in their senior years, because these are entry positions. Now, for those who have, say, worked for a few years, they might stand out in our recruitment exercise. The second reason is that for positions requiring higher education attainment, such as degree positions, they tend to be overqualified because it's now the trend for young people to further their studies after graduation. We also have young people who furthered their studies abroad after graduating in Hong Kong, and they've come back to Hong Kong after a few years. That accounts for the more senior age, but we also have some fresh graduates joining the civil service. They are usually either 23 or 24 years of age. So we do recruit these young colleagues as well. Now, to answer the second question about those resigning during the probation period, the high percentage reflects the purpose of the probation period. In terms of the colleagues' caliber or their aptitude or aspiration, they may find that there is a mismatch in terms of their ability or their expectation during the probation period. And that's why they've left the service. In 2025-26, as of the 30th of September 2025, about 45% of those who resigned did so during the probation period. What about the age profile? Is it below 29? Is it that younger people tended to leave the service during the probation period? We do not have the breakdown for those who left during the probation period. But like I explained, when these recruits joined us, they were in their 20s or early 30s, so mostly in the same age group by the time they left. Next, Mr. Stephen Ho. Thank you, Chair. First of all, I want to say that we do have an excellent civil service in Hong Kong, and we have had numerous discussions with the administration on enhancing the civil service. And about the retirement age, well, I understand that some members have written to the government requesting an improvement of the conditions of service for the civil servants. We need to strike a balance. For those in the lower or middle rank, I don't want to comment on their levels of salary. But for directorate grade officers or senior civil servants, they tend to get high pay comparing to the market rate, and that may have an impact on the attrition rate. Now, there may be a higher incentive for them to leave the service. We need to strike a balance when it comes to the use of public funds. Now, for professional grades, such as engineers or those in the maritime industry, the maritime inspectors may earn more than $1 million a year in the private market. So the government should provide more incentives to attract professionals to join the service. And the government should also address the public's perception on salary levels of the civil service. The second point is about the attrition rate. It's on the high side. The Secretary also explained to us that for those underperformers, certain rules will be invoked to make them leave, so to speak. But then, how does the administration address this pressure, and how does the administration make sure that the balance is struck?
First, on the service conditions of civil servants. Indeed, for the more senior civil servants, meaning those at the directorate level and also those in the more professional grade, it is hard to offer a pay on a par with that in the private market. The private market indeed offers higher pay than what's offered by the government. But as Mr. Ho pointed out, we have to strike a balance. the work of the civil service has an edge over the private market. We offer job stability in the sense of security. When the market is slower, civil servants will hold on to their jobs with greater ease. We have people in the private market here, they know well. Those in a senior position in the private market enjoy little job security when the market is slow. All of a sudden, they are out of a job, whereas the government offers job security. One more reason that the civil service can attract applicants is that our work in the civil service is very different from that in the private market. For new joiners, I remind them all the time that in the private market, workers serve the shareholders and their bosses to maximize profits, whereas in the civil service, we serve the public, we serve the community. Civil servants take part in policy work. Professionals can make a difference for the community. When these workers retire, they have a sense of pride. This is something that a job in the private market, which is about profits, cannot offer. And this is where the civil service is also attractive as a career option. So we'll keep getting rid of the underperformers and keep the best. The wastage rate has been lower last year than the years before. Resignation rate is now below 2%, which is on the low side. We're also seeing a shrinking number of retirees. In a few years' time, that decrease will be more marked. Every year, we get retirees and people leaving for other reasons. But that will not stop our effort to keep only the best in the service. Keeping civil servants who are not up to scratch, keeping underperformers in the service, will discourage the good performers, and that will be a stronger incentive for the good performers to leave. So we will keep getting rid of the underperformers. Dr. Johnny I start by thanking the Secretary for the Civil Service to briefing us on the figures so that we get a better sense of the civil servants' work. We have an excellent civil service. The establishment is 190,000 workers. The strength is roughly 170,000 workers, so there's a gap of 20,000 workers. So I'm checking my understanding here. If we have to cut the establishment by 2% every year, there's little impact on the actual strength. Now, of course, the situation may vary from department to department, so I just want to check my understanding to see if this is correct. And if that's indeed the basis, which departments will see the largest reduction to their establishment or strength? So can we get a sense of the top 2 departments that will see most of the reduction? When that reduction happens, how do we ensure the service delivered to the public will remain unaffected? The paper discusses streamlining the service. Technology will be one lever we will use to achieve that goal without compromising public service. AI agents are moving fast these days. We used to have AI offering simple answers to questions, but now the situation has changed. Now, AI agents can assist with more clerical tasks. Some local governments elsewhere have produced effective strategies using AI to perform cross-departmental tasks. The government here has also set up the AI Efficacy Enhancement Team, and there will be streamlining involving various services. So how's that work coming along? Secretary. Dr. is correct. In 2026 to 27, 2027 to 28, in each of those years, we will shrink the establishment by 2% on the basis of the previous year, and that will have a minimal impact on the strength. In 2027 to 28, when we revisit these figures, we will see a smaller gap between the establishment and the strength. Now, on the departments that will see the biggest cuts to the establishment, for each envelope holder, and this means each director of bureau, under each director, they have a family. Under each bureau, there are a number of departments. The director of bureau decides how to spend the money in each envelope. So in each family, meaning in each set of departments, they have to show us a 2% cut to the establishment. Each director of bureau has autonomy over where to make the cuts to their respective departments. Larger departments with a larger establishment will make bigger cuts. So the department with the biggest establishment is the police force. So the police force will see the biggest cut. For the civilian departments, such as the FEHD, which has the largest civilian establishment, they will also see big cut. How do we ensure we do not affect our day-to-day work? This relies on technology. Take the police force. The force now uses drones for patrols in remote areas or for traffic tasks. In crowded urban areas, there's traffic control and there's investigation work. The Smart View initiative is an example where the police can save manpower. Or you can also look at the FEHD. When they investigate water seepage cases, they adopt new technologies. Again, technology saves manpower. When they investigate dripping from air conditioners, which has been a public nuisance, the work used to be labor-intensive. Now there's technology, there's greater efficiency, and there's greater saving in manpower. Departments also revisit their work priorities. There are long-established processes in place for decades, but there may be underused services. So in those cases, we can move those services down the list of priorities and we can redeploy the manpower elsewhere where they are more in need. We can also streamline procedures. In the past, we required the public to submit tons of documents, but we may already have those documents in place and we can retrieve the documents easily with technology. So here, technology can obviate the need to have counter staff who will otherwise have to perform the checking. So here technology can save manpower again. For the use of AI, the Deputy Chief Secretary chairs the AI Advocacy Enhancement Team. For that team, we have selected 2 departments for trials. Those 2 departments will look at their tasks, they're labor-intensive. We will look at where AI can be adopted. We proceed with the trials, and then in the future, we will adopt AI more widely. Mr. Lam Chen Sing. The civil service establishment is 119,000 workers. Their strength is $170,000, so a gap of $20,000. Back in 2021, the establishment was 185,000 workers. The strength back then was 175,000 workers. So back then, the gap was only 10,000 workers. So a strange phenomenon has occurred. The establishment has grown, but the strength has shrunk. So when we shrink the establishment by 10,000 workers, how do we ensure that we shrink the establishment while increasing the strength? For departments with many vacancies, how do we urge them to hire enough workers to fill the vacancies. Our concern is that you shrink the establishment by 10,000 workers, and then we will still be left with 20,000 vacancies, and then we will be left with 160,000 civil servants, and we are concerned that that may hurt public services. The paper also mentions that for directorate civil servants, there are vacancies. So now the government is doing open recruitment for senior posts in the civil service. So how do we formulate the conditions of service? We're recruiting the director for food and environmental hygiene. Previous directors would move on to become permanent secretaries. But now we are hiring for this post on a 3-year contract, and there will be no posting or promotion to other positions. Will that dent the appeal of this post? Will there be a timetable or a goal for more directorate civil service posts to be subject to open recruitment? Will there be a regularized mechanism to encourage the inflow of talent? When we look at this establishment versus strength back in 2019 and before, and now, we do see a larger gap between the establishment and strength. Part of the reason is a larger establishment. The COVID years dealt a blow to recruitment. Hiring slowed down or even were halted. During the COVID years, face-to-face interviews were heavily affected. It was hard to invite applicants to sit written tests back then. So recruitment slowed down in those COVID years. That's true. Recruitment is also more protracted in the civil service. This is in contrast to private enterprises. In the private market, when you find the right candidate, you can hire the candidate on the spot. Hiring in the civil service is different. We value fairness. When you have 1,000 applicants for one position, we have to go through every applicant. When we want to shortlist people, we have to apply the criteria fairly. So we may shortlist 300 candidates. And even then, we have to go through the shortlisted candidates, say maybe 300 out of 1,000, and then we find the best candidate before we offer appointment. The advantage is fairness, but the downside is that it becomes a lengthy process. We have made attempts to shorten this process. As I said in the opening remarks, we now have the digitalized Basic Law and National Security Law test. In the past, there were 2 written tests every year. We had to secure the venues. We have to put staff at the venues for the candidates to take the tests. The applicants need the test results, but if the hiring ended before the tests were available, that prevented us from hiring people. Now we have digitized tests. Prospective candidates can book an appointment every day. They can sit the test in front of a computer. They get the result on the same day. That means even when candidates are in a rush to apply for a post, they can make it in time. This prevents the loss of suitable candidates who simply couldn't get the test results in time. We also encourage departments to put greater effort into planning their recruitment ahead of time so they can set up several interview boards at the same time instead of having a single interview board that takes a long time to go through the process. These are some measures we have taken to speed up hiring so that we don't leave people waiting and then the good candidates join other organizations in the private market and then we miss the people. Now, on open hiring for senior positions, especially for departmental heads, we look at the need take the position of the Director of Food and Environmental Hygiene. The FEHD brought in changes over the past few years. The incumbent brought in changes. The FEHD has the potential to adopt technology. They can adopt different tactics in law enforcement. A solid foundation has been laid down. Now we can build on that foundation. So we're now looking for suitable talent from the outside to see if we can go further with these measures. That's why we decided on open recruitment. On whether more open recruitment will come down the road, that will depend on the positions involved and the need at that moment. So we may not have a regular mechanism in place. There may not be a standing practice for open recruitment. We make it clear that the successful candidate will not get promotion or posting. Now, we're talking about D6 position. Any post above D6 will be the permanent secretary. Permanent secretaries can only be filled by administrative officers. For the Director of Food and Environmental Hygiene, the candidate will not be an administrative officer, so this person will not be able to move on to a D8 position, which is a permanent secretary. So that's the reason.
Next, Mr. Kingsley Wong, thank you. I'm concerned about resignation of civil servants. Now, there has been a decline, but 10 years ago, it was 0.6, 0.7. Now it's 1.4%. Has it to do with the pay freeze in recent years or heavier workload despite the shrunken establishment? The second point is that I think the benefits remains the major tool for enhancing appeal of the civil service. Now, for the civil servants public housing quota, I see that the number of applications have boomed, and that now the government has increased public housing supply. Will the government consider increasing the quota per year from 1,000 to, say, 1,100 or even 1,200, so that the rank and file of the disciplined service and junior civil servants will get allocated with the public housing unit as quickly as possible? Now, in Singapore, allowances are given, say, $3,000 a year for civil servants to join fitness programs. Now, this also happens in the private sector. Those who are overweight are encouraged to lose weight for the health. So will the government consider keeping up with the times for overweight civil servants? Is there any plan to subsidize them to take up a scheme to put off weight? Thank you, Chair. Now, in terms of the resignation rate, 1.4% is really a low percentage comparing to the private sector, which usually registers a double-digit figure. Now, comparing to the previous rates of 0.6 or 0.7%, the figure has now increased. I think this is due to, for example, more choices for young people. Some young civil servants resign during the probation period because they may not have the ability to carry on, or they may have other aspirations. They may wish to further their studies or pursue their dreams in another way. And there are more choices for young people nowadays in terms of further studies or career choices. The other point is that in recent years, we have placed stronger emphasis on ensuring that officers on probationary terms can really suit the jobs they've taken up. And for the probation period, it's one of 3 years. So for probationary officers leaving the service within the probation period, it's actually a good thing for themselves as well as for the relevant departments. We don't need to deploy resources to train somebody who is not suited to the job. And for the younger civil servants, it may be good for them to leave the service and find another job. So we now place emphasis on this mechanism during the probation period. This also accounts for the relatively high percentage of resignation during the probation period. So that accounts for the higher figure comparing to the one in, say, 10 years ago. Comparing to the private sector, this remains a low percentage. Now, for public housing for civil servants, we need to strike a balance between the quota for civil servants and public housing supply for the general public. And we do have an annual review. The review is now in progress. We will report the findings to the unions in due course. For more innovative benefit packages, well, we haven't thought about the suggestions made by Mr. Kingsley Wong, but in recent years we do have other new measures. For example, we have some family-friendly measures such as paternal leave and marriage leave, so that there is work-life balance for our colleagues. We'll continue to roll out measures in this direction. Next, Mr. Aaron Bok. Thank you. 2 questions. Now, I asked this question before. I'm referring to paragraph 3 in the paper. You strive to reduce the civil service establishment by 2% in each of the next 2 years, but the government is going to take forward Northern Metropolis development. There will be infrastructure projects as well. That means more on the plate for the works departments. But with this target in mind, that's a 2% cut in the establishment, then the departments concerned will have to follow. So for these works departments, will they be able to adopt a less aggressive target, say 1.5%, so that there will be extra manpower to take up the additional workload? I'm concerned about those leaving the civil service. According to Annex D, and as reported by the Secretary, this is a downward trend. But in the long term, indeed, this resignation trend is on the rise. Starting from 2016, in fact, the number of civil servants leaving the service has been on the rise, because starting from year 2000, civil servants who joined the no longer enjoy the pension. Instead, they go by the Civil Service Provident Fund. So previously, for civil servants leaving the service, they had a lot to lose, including pension, and for those who joined after year 2000, they'll be able to get the portion of the contribution in the Provident Fund made by themselves as well as by the employer, which is the government. So as other members suggested, there is now much more appeal in the private market. And it will be more difficult for the government to retain these colleagues. So for directorate officers, the government should provide more incentives to keep them. You talk about commitment, social responsibility, commitment to serve the public. But the government should roll out a policy to keep these dedicated civil servants. my take is that because the pay for D1 is just $16,000 more than colleagues on point 49 of the master pay scale. But in terms of responsibility and workload, there is now much more on the plate of this senior colleague. The pay difference, however, is just 16,000. So there isn't enough incentive. The government should roll out a measure in the long term to retain these colleagues. Secretary. Thank you, Chair. Now, I answered Mr. Kingsley Wong's question now. If we take a look at the resignation rate, indeed, this rate is now higher than those 10 years ago or 15 years ago. It was just somewhere below 1% back then. Now it's higher, but then I say this is a decline. This is a decreasing trend, and this rate is already lower than that in the private market. Now, about the cut in the establishment size, as I explained just now, there are different groups, and the groups of departments are required to cut the establishment by 2% per envelope. So this applies to different policy areas and different departments. They are facing more pressure and they have additional workload. So it's not really fair to allow certain departments or policy areas to enjoy an exemption. Because when it comes to, say, innovation technology, we now adopt AI, and we also leverage on technology in order to meet the goal of developing an international I&T center in Hong Kong. But at the same time, for example, we need to keep our status as an international financial center and shipping center and trade center. So it's not fair just to lower the target for certain departments. I'd say that downsizing the establishment by 2% is not really a lot of pressure for the departments. And we don't require specific positions to be cut. So the envelope holders are at liberty to choose their way in slashing the establishment. For example, in some departments, we have professionals as well as administrative staff. So perhaps they can go for a downsizing of the administrative section so that by adopting technology or AI or digitalization, they can enhance efficiency and cope with additional workload with less manpower. This is actually achieved by some of the departments. So indeed, there are ways for them to meet this target. There are different ways already adopted by or considered by these departments. Retirement protection. Indeed, for those appointed on new terms, they have Civil Service Provident Fund as retirement protection. Now, is there a strong enough appeal to retain senior or experienced civil service? In fact, starting from 1987, we introduced a new pension scheme. And for those who have yet to reach a certain years of experience in the service, they do not enjoy pension. Now, for Civil Service Provident Fund, the design is such that if you remain in the service for a longer period, you get a higher rate of contribution from the government, up to 25%. And that is one way of retaining our colleagues. So if we compare the new pension scheme and the Civil Service Provident Fund, I'd say that the design of these two schemes are similar. Now you still get, to a certain extent, retirement protection. Only that if you leave earlier, you get less. So I don't think by switching to Civil Service Provident Fund, it results in a higher attrition rate. As for pay and benefits, this is something under regular review. Grade structure review will be required if we go for a big change. So we do keep in view whether there is a need to conduct a grade structure review. Mr. Bok just now mentioned 0.45 to 0.49 on the master pay scale and the pay difference of this colleague with the other colleague of a directorate rank. Well, I had the same experience, and I would say that in terms of responsibilities, there is a big difference. It's just a $6,000 difference for an AO grade, for example, but there is a huge difference in terms of responsibilities. Colleagues, however, are still dedicated to their positions because of their commitment. Apart from pay and benefits, we also promote staff by meritocracy, not by the years of experience, so as to encourage those of a high caliber to remain. They get promoted earlier, in other words. That's a major appeal. And this is something that we go along at this stage. We want to pick the best and get them promoted.
Secretary, a short reply would do for the second question because we have seriously overrun. It's about the wastage levers. I would like to explore this issue with the Secretary. Members will have to observe the time limit. 4 members are waiting to speak. We can extend the meeting because there's a next meeting that will need this room. Secretary, please also keep your responses brief. Mr. Lam Wai Kong. Thank you, Chairman. I thank the Secretary for leading our outstanding civil service in serving the public. In shrinking the civil service establishment, civil servants have complained about growing workload. In light of that, how do we ensure the delivery of public services remains unaffected? The Secretary mentioned technology as a way to reduce the workload. For civil servants, some of their tasks cannot be performed with technology yet. This involves patrolling, law enforcement, and regulatory work. You will still need people to do the work. So how do we strike a better balance between the workload and service delivery? So we now have a plan. We will shrink the establishment by 2% each year. Now, on reprioritizing work, internal redeployment, and use of technology, do we have a holistic assessment to determine whether we are keeping up with the pace at which we shrink the establishment? Secretary. As we shrink the establishment while maintaining service delivery, and there are frontline services that appear to require manpower, such as patrolling, inspections, and regulation. Technology can play a role. Departments are adopting technology. Now, for inspections and regulation, AI can tell us which are the high-risk spots. Once we have the spots, we concentrate our resources there. That would be better than flying blind, where you inspect every spot regardless of the risk level. So technology can help with manpower deployment. Risk-based deployment hinges on technology, and that will save manpower. We accomplish more with less manpower with greater precision. Inspections also involve technology now. Take the police force. Say Shackle Road, which is hard to access. The police force is using drones for patrolling. Works department also adopt drones or robots for inspections in inaccessible spots. With manpower, you have to send officers there multiple times. They have to take equipment with them, but technology can save manpower. For frontline services, we will ensure service delivery. On how we redeploy resources internally to maintain the service, this will require a review of different policy bureaus and departments of their respective needs. Each controlling officer has flexibility over the use of resources at their disposal. They can redeploy the posts. For example, the policy address last year mentioned the Census and Statistics Department. The CNSD has adopted AI-based tools for labor-intensive work that used to be performed by clerical posts. With technology, these posts can be deleted. The resources freed up from the deletion can go into statistical analysis. The workload remains unchanged, but the CNSD has been able to keep up with the work. The controlling officer, meaning the head of a department of the permanent secretary, has the flexibility to deploy the resources. Next, Mr. Chen Kwok. The wastage rate from 2024 to 25 included 2,385 resignees. Are most of them on MPF terms? Does it have to do with pensions? The MPF was brought in 2000, so we should start seeing retirees on MPF terms. But we saw 2,385 people who resigned. Were all of them on MPF terms? If not, would that mean the MPF terms are unattractive, leading to more leavers? I'm also from the civil service. Two things keep civil servants. First, housing. Second, pay. Of course, dental benefits and healthcare also matter. If you have a higher pay, you can access private healthcare. Better healthcare and housing benefits can retain civil servants. Now, for junior civil servants, can we improve the mechanism for the housing benefit, such as the CSPHQ and the housing benefits? Can we give these civil servants access 10 or 15 years before their retirement so that we can keep more such civil servants here? Secretary. Leavers who resign tend to be younger workers. More than 40% or close to 45% leave during probation. They are on MPF terms. Retirees are people of a more advanced age. They joined the service before 2000, so they were on the old terms with pensions. But we cannot conclude on that basis that the MPF terms are unattractive. Our leavers are at a very low level, at 1.4%. I don't think we can jump to the conclusion that the CSPF or the Civil Service Provident Fund is an attractive option. Our entire system is designed to retain people. For those who have served for more than 20 years, their CFPF contribution will be up to 17.5%. For those who serve longer, it can be up to 22.5% and up to 25% in the end. That's a sizable level of contribution from the government, and that's the highest in Hong Kong. So this feature retains talent. The next point has to do with housing benefits. I gave a reply to Mr. Kingsley Wong's question. I get the member's point. People would like to see more spots under the quota system of public housing for civil servants. We have put that under constant review, but we also have to take into account the public demand for public housing units. The review is going on. We review this every year. Once we have an outcome, we will let members know. Now, on the housing benefit mentioned by the member, this is a flexible scheme. So people now get access to a 10-year non-accountable cash allowance for housing. They don't have to buy the flat. They don't even have to stay in the unit they buy. So this is essentially a cash allowance. This non-accountable cash allowance scheme is more flexible than the old scheme where people had to buy a flat. Next, Mr. Augustine Wong. I have a concern after reading the paper, and this has to do with Directorate civil servants. We're now hiring from the outside for D6 posts. It looks good. We're hiring from the outside, but wouldn't that also have implications for promotion from within? Would that also mean we will have fewer people to promote to the D8 level? So we hire from the outside in the middle. These people will not be promoted or posted elsewhere. So that will have an impact on the more junior administrative officers. So do we have a plan about which posts will work better for open recruitment? Some civil servants may have this concern, but I want to say this. We are not trying to put in a standing practice where we do open recruitment for all departmental heads. It depends on the needs of the moment. We look at the expertise required. If we cannot find the right person within the service, we tap outside talent. When we need such outside expertise, we do open recruitment. That is not to say we will always hire from the outside for a certain post. When there's an improvement, things change, we need to promote civil servants. At that point, we will promote civil servants. So it depends on the needs of the moment, which change over time. This will not have an impact on succession in the civil service. We're only hiring from the outside for a small number of departmental heads. The number of posts in the senior positions open for applications from the outside will change from time to time. This is not a standing practice. I hope this can reassure members. Any follow-up questions from Mr. Wong? No? Followed by me.
All right, I'm the last member to speak. Secretary, I'm concerned about this mechanism of recruiting directorate grade officers. For the Director of Food and Environmental Hygiene, as we know, the Food and Environmental Hygiene Department is one of the major law enforcing departments. Now, this director will oversee over 10,000 civil servants. So, what factors have you considered in deciding that this position should be taken up by somebody with no experience in the civil service to be recruited through open recruitment? My other question is this. Now you've decided to go for open hiring. Now this directorate grade post is supposed to be taken up by an administrative officer or candidates within the range of the relevant grades. But is it because the pool is now too small and no suitable candidates can be picked, and that's why you've gone for open recruitment? I understand that this is a position not eligible for promotion or transfer. Now, in the last term of government in 2022, I also put this question to the secretary then. The best candidates may not wish to take up this position because of the promotion prospects. Take the Director of Food and Environmental Hygiene as an example. The predecessors could be promoted to a D8 position. Now, would an AO candidate be deterred from applying for this position because of the limited career prospects or promotion prospects? Thank you. Now, when it comes to open recruitment for, say, this director position, as I explained just now, we've considered the fact that this director takes up a large portfolio overseeing a lot of colleagues. And in fact, the predecessors already adopted different solutions to modernize the work of the department. A new service delivery model is adopted to make sure that the FEHD is kept abreast with the times, and that's the current work model that we see. The FEHD has a large establishment, is a labor-intensive department, so there is room to adopt technology. Say, when it comes to law enforcement, we want to see if new approaches can be adopted, such as a risk-based approach or a change in the law enforcement mode, so as to achieve greater effectiveness. And on this basis, we would like to see if there are outside talents who can help us in this regard. And that's the reason for open hiring. But open recruitment does not mean that we screen out those who have or have not any experience in public service. We do not impose any age limit either. For those who have experience in the government or in public organizations at the managerial position, and also those with experience in law enforcement and application of technologies, we welcome them in applying for this position. Because, like the Chair said, the previous approach was to only allow administrative officers to apply for this position. But now we welcome civil servants not reaching the eligible rank for promotion to apply through open recruitment as well. So we've actually broadened the field for candidates. These civil servants who are not eligible for internal promotion can apply for open recruitment. Can apply for this position through open recruitment. Because as I explained, we need to make sure that the FEHD provides service that could cope with the modern day needs. So I emphasize that we adopt open recruitment for this position, but it doesn't mean that this will become a trend. It depends on the needs. And as I said, despite having one less position for administrative officers, their promotion prospects will not be limited. Those who are capable will be eligible for promotion. Right, let's move on to the next item. Non-civil service contract staff. We received a submission from the Government Employees Association before the meeting. This submission has been forwarded to members. We've also forwarded the same to the administration. We look forward to a written reply from the administration. I don't know if the Secretary would like to respond to that in a moment. Members, if you want to speak, please press the request to speak button. Now I will invite Mrs. Ingrid Yang to walk us through the paper. Thank you, Chair. On a regular basis, the Civil Service Bureau reports the latest situation concerning the employment of non-civil service contract staff or NCSC staff by the government. I will now go through the paper. The NCSC staff scheme provides heads of departments with flexible means to employ staff on fixed-term contracts outside the civil service establishment to cope with the changing operational and service needs of bureaus and departments. Now, any candidate so recruited must first be approved by the heads of departments, and that the relevant rules of the scheme should be met. These are positions which are usually time-limited, seasonal, or subject to market fluctuations. And the other conditions are, for example, the working hours of manpower required of the work are less than the conditioned hours of civil servants, and there is a need to tap the latest expertise from the labor market in a particular area to perform the job. And for mode of delivery of the service involved, if it's under review or likely to be changed, then the relevant bureaus or departments may consider hiring NCSC candidates. Now, once there is no longer the need to keep these NCSC positions, they will be scrapped. So the numbers fluctuate. According to the survey as in 2025, as at the 30th of June 2025, there were 10,671 full-time NCSC staff, down by some 42% comparing to the peak in 2006, and also an increase of around 4% comparing to the same period in 2024. In light of the relevant policy initiatives, some policy bureaus and departments might need to hire more NCSC staff for time-limited or project or one-off projects. Now, for example, the Registration and Electoral Office recruited 370 NCSC positions for the Electoral General Elections 2025. The Culture, Sports and Tourism Bureau likewise employed about 150 NCSC staff to take forward the planning and implementation of the 15th National Games and the 12th National Games for persons with disabilities in the 9th National Special Olympic Games, and that accounts for the increase in the number of NCSC staff as of June 30th, 2025, comparing to the same period in 2024. But with the deletion of these positions at the end of these projects, the figure should go down. Over half of these positions were created to cope with seasonal demands and operational needs. For example, the CNSD recruited 260 NCSC staff to cope with the short-term manpower need for various projects under the CNSD. There are also 17% of NCSC positions established in the 5 training fund departments to meet operational and service needs subject to market fluctuations. This is to give them flexibility in adjusting staffing level and mix to respond to fluctuations in business. 13% of NCSC staff were engaged with working hours less than the conditioned hours for civil service positions. And there were also NCSC staff recruited who have special expertise in a particular area. Now, for the remaining 13% of NCSC staff, they were engaged, cope with operational and service needs when the mode of service was under review or likely to be changed. The bureaus and departments will review the positions on a regular basis to see if there is a better way of coping with the operational needs and service needs. We also review the terms and conditions of service for NCSC staff to make sure that these positions remain competitive so as to retain them. For example, we offer 14 weeks of full paid maternity leave and 5 days of full paid paternity leave, as well as 17 days of general holidays with pay. Starting from April 2024, the government provides marriage leave and compassionate leave up to 3 days. And starting from April 2025, the government provides 3 days of childcare leave per year for so as to put in place a new family-friendly employment measure to create a favorable childbearing environment. NCSC staff also benefit from the family-friendly leave. The NCSC scheme provides an effective avenue for the flexible deployment of human resources so that we continue to deliver and serve the public. We'd be happy to take questions and comments from members. Thank you, Secretary. 5 members would like to speak, Mr. Lam Chen Sing, Aaron Bok, Chris Ip, Lam Wai Kong, and myself. 4 minutes questions and answer, starting with Mr. Lam Chen Sing. Thank you. According to the paper, over 3,000 NCSC staff have 5 or more years of continuous service. And the Secretary also explained that many of these NCSC positions were established under the training fund departments such as the EMSD and Hong Kong Post. The government is going to take forward development projects such as the Northern Metropolis. There will also be new government hospitals. And these hospitals, for example, would usually engage the EMSD for repair and maintenance instead of engaging a service contractor. Now, are there ways to make sure there is sufficient manpower to cope with the additional workload? Can we improve the conditions and benefits for NCSC staff to increase the appeal? For example, during inclement weather and typhoons, there is no allowance for NCSC staff. Can we improve that? Can we turn NCSC positions into permanent positions to ensure a stable stream of manpower supply? The second question is this. As I understand, for civil servants retiring at the age of 60, many of them choose to extend the service, as that's one way of extending the retirement age for civil servants. But this is only good up to the age of 65. are there suitable positions for the NCSC staff to work beyond 65, say up to 66 or 67, because the government is promoting the silver economy? Can the government take the lead and do something to the NCSC scheme so as to take the lead and set an example for the private sector to hire the senior staff?
Secretary, for the 5 departments with trading funds, those departments do need a certain number of non-civil service contract staff members. Now, take the EMSD as an example. That department lost some contract, such as a contract from the hospital authority, so the business of the EMSD is not guaranteed. With the loss of such a contract, the EMSD had to adjust its staff size, and that affected the non-civil service contract staff. More work is expected for the EMSD. When the EMSD has to hire more NCSC workers, they will follow the same procedure that applies to other departments, meaning the EMSD will come to the Civil Service Bureau with justifications, and then we can grant some extra spots under the quota on discretionary basis. When there's short-term need, we allow the EMSD to hire extra workers on a time-limited basis. Once that time lapses, those NCSC posts are deleted. If the department sees a need to renew the contract, those departments can apply to the Civil Service Bureau. We exercise strict control over these matters because we want to guard against abuse. We want our programs to be able to support the manpower needs of departments. On benefits, we have some broad guiding principles for departments. We have parental leave and marriage leave. For this policy, we require departments to extend such leave not just to civil servants but also to the NCSC workers. 5 days of fully paid paternity leave and 14 weeks of fully paid maternity leave plus 17 fully paid public holidays. For the pay, departments will offer competitive pay packages. Otherwise, they won't be able to attract workers. But departments will also have to bear in mind their finances because they have to pay for these workers. So the CSB leaves it up to each department to decide on their own in the light of their respective professional areas. When it comes to leave and holidays, our overall guiding principle is to go above the minimum requirement under the employment ordinance. There was a second question. Can we hire older workers to fill the posts? I'm sorry I left out that question in my answers. Now for NCSC staff, we do not put an age cap on hiring. When there's a suitable candidate, departments can hire that candidate even if that candidate is older than 65 years old. For retired civil servants, when we need the experience or expertise of the retired civil servant, we have a scheme subject to a cap of 5 years. Every year there are new retirees. With more and more retirees, we want a healthy turnover of such civil servants with expertise. If there's an outstanding retiree with expertise that cannot be found among other retirees, such a department can apply to the CSB to make an exception in such a case. Most civil servants retire at 60 now. In the future, civil servants will retire at 65. So under this 5-year scheme, they will be able to work till they turn 70. Next, Mr. Aaron Bok. 2 questions. The Secretary has said time and again that departments can hire more workers in light of needs. But each department will have to pay those workers from their own envelope. You need the resources to get the work done. That's why I suggested exceptional arrangements for departments that expect a lot of work in the years to come, without relaxing the rules by the CSB. Departments will have to strictly adhere to the rules. Now, coming back to NCSC, for works departments, they create NCSC posts based on project. There's a project, so they hire workers. Once the works are done, they get rid of the workers. That's only reasonable. For the workers, there's a lack of job security. We expect many projects down the road. They will come in succession. This applies to the Northern Metropolis. When you expect a long line of projects, can we consider converting the NCSC posts into civil service posts? Civil service posts offer security. People won't have to worry about not being able to secure the next post after the current project. And at that point, the workers will have the peace of mind to spend money, start a family, and have children. When you see such operational needs in the next 5 years, can we convert the NCSC posts involved into civil service posts to give people the peace of mind? Now, the Government Employees Association wrote to us about the Buildings Department laying off 60 contract workers. This is bizarre, because now is the time for inspections, meaning safety checks on building maintenance projects. After the Wangfu Court fire, officers will now have to check the scaffolding. At this moment, laying off 60 workers does not appear to make much sense. So can the CSB talk to the Buildings Department? Can we make changes to their arrangement? Secretary, I will need a bit more time because several questions were put to me. The first 2 questions had to do with the resource allocation exercise. When you want to hire more NCSC workers, it doesn't always come out of the envelope from the Director of Bureau. Creation of a post that amounts to a net increase in the posts can be done via an application to the Central Resource Allocation or Central Resource Exercise. Hiring NCSC workers means departmental expenses. When that happens, resources go to the departments. Of course, there's a cap on how long resources will go into the department. So departments are not bearing the costs in full. But when more work needs to be done in the same area, the department involved will have to bear the cost with money from their own envelope. When we see an ongoing operational need, can we create civil service posts in place of NCSC posts? This question is up to the departments involved. Our goal is to shrink the establishment by 2% in each of the 2 years. But even then, under the resource allocation exercise, departments in need can't take on more workers. We simply need to shrink the civil service establishment as a whole by 2% each year for 2 years in a row. At the project level, when departments need to take on more workers, the resource allocation exercise allows such departments to create more posts so that they can meet the manpower needs. Decisions over creating more civil service posts or these NCSC posts are up to the envelope holders, meaning the directors of bureaus. So that answers the second question. The third question has to do with the buildings department. The BD has more work to do, but the department is also adopting more new technologies so that they can achieve more with less manpower and greater precision. On how the BD uses its resources, on the number of NCSC workers they hire and the work the staff members are put on, whether there are more workers for inspections, those decisions are left to the buildings department. We set a cap. When the BD goes above the cap, they have to apply to the CSB. Deletion decisions are left to the BD. Mr. Chris Ip. We got an email before the meeting. A few days ago, there was a media report, and that also involved the buildings department. My concern is that the public worries about an impact on frontline service delivery. The public worries about service delivery. They worry about safety. Can we allow flexibility for the department involved? Can we allocate resources in light of emergencies? I get it, we have to streamline manpower, we make use of technology. I support the overall direction. But when it comes to operation and when it comes to contingencies, can we allow flexibility? Can the CSB allow departments to keep resources to create non-civil service posts to meet emergency needs? Can we do that? Can we do that to give greater flexibility to departments? Shrinking the establishment is good and well, but can the CSB give flexibility to departments? That's my concern. Secretary. This has to do with the resource allocation exercise. All departments follow the same procedure. In an emergency, when a department needs more resources, departments can apply to the RAE. Even in the middle of the year, the department can indicate the need for more manpower. They may need more civil servants or non-civil service contract staff. Departments may simply need more money. Such applications for extra resources can go to the RAE in the middle of the year. We handle quite a number of them throughout the year. Departments can access such resources. The flexibility is already there. On the quota of NCSC staff, the BD is simply trying to lay off workers. They're not hiring more workers, so they don't need approval from the CSB. When the BD needs to take on more workers, the BD can apply to the CSB. So we're not so rigid as to allow applications only before the start of the financial year. So the flexibility is there.
Anything to add? Well, I want to clarify this point because the government's goal is to slash positions that are no longer needed. So will it disincentivize departments in applying for NCSC positions to be created? As I explained, if there is apparently some new operational needs, then additional resources will definitely be allocated. In the past 2 or 3 years, indeed, new resources were allocated to the relevant departments. Now, there are some financial implications in the internal resource allocation exercise, so I'm not going to give you details, but apparently if additional manpower is needed to cope with new service needs, then we do provide flexibility. We are not very rigid. Well, we are not excessively rigid in approving applications. However, we will scrutinize the applications to see if the resources required by the departments are really necessary in terms of the operational needs. And if these are genuine needs, we'll definitely allocate resources. Mr. Lam Wai Kong. I'd like to follow up on the points raised by the labor sector members as well as the housing department issue. Now, as I understand, with the reduction in the establishment in mind, some NCSC staff may not have their contracts renewed, and for the buildings department, this is just the tip of an iceberg. Now, some NCSC positions are not renewed, and yet these NCSC colleagues do work on several projects that are livelihood related, such as building inspection, the Operation Building Bright, or matters relating to water seepage. So how do you make sure that public service is delivered whilst maintaining a suitable level of manpower? I just want to make sure that the buildings department has the flexibility to handle this matter. The other point is that earlier we talked to the department representatives, and we have the impression that the buildings department has quite a lot of work, and that NCSC staff are required to cope with the workload. Now, Secretary just now mentioned that they can apply for resources under the RAE, but if resources are not available, then by the time the contracts comes to an end, the contracts may not be able to be renewed. And then if there is still a service need, you need to go through the whole recruitment process again, and that means administrative procedures. Is there a way to keep the staff who have acquired experience instead of laying them off and rehiring them again? Secretary. Well, thank you, Chair. In terms of controlling expenditure, I don't think that there is a huge effort in slashing NCSC positions. I mean, in the whole fiscal consolidation program, we require the departments to slash their establishment by 2%. Now, I'm referring to civil service establishment. And on top of that, they are required to cut spending by 2% as well. Now, for civil service establishments, it is much larger than that of NCSC staff. And that applies to the spending as well, because of, say, civil service provident fund and other benefits. The expenditure in these areas for civil servants are higher than that for NCSC staff. So, in fact, slashing civil service positions could help departments meet this budget crunch target much easier than cutting NCSC positions. If they're able to downsize the establishment by 2%, and I mean civil service establishment, they will have met the 2% spending cut target instead of slashing NCC positions. But on the contrary, through reprioritizing the work or adopting technology, they may review the establishment and see whether the same level of manpower should be maintained for this kind of work. And that happens. Say they may have reprioritized their tasks and they may have begun to take a risk-based approach in the inspection efforts, and that also accounts for less manpower required. And as I understand, that's the situation for the buildings department. And this will also affect the number of NCSC positions. Thank you, Secretary. Right, next, my turn. Now, against the backdrop of a 2% spending cut target, I have expressed my concern on a number of occasions whether the relevant departments will first go for the NCSC positions, whether these positions will be the first ones to be cut. NCSC staff contribute significantly to the overall civil service. And the Secretary just now answered a number of times that the departments will not blindly slash NCSC positions. For the Buildings Department, however, on this occasion, we do witness a lot of NCSC positions being slashed despite the increase in workload. Like Mr. Wong Kwok said, that's the impression we got as we talked to the department. So despite a need for manpower for this level of workload, the number of NCSC positions is still reduced. Now, Secretary, is there a way to for you to take up the coordination in this regard? Secretary, you also explained that by adopting technology solutions, there may not be a need for the same level of manpower, but cutting 60 NCSC positions out of 100 in total is relatively a high proportion. And as I understand, among these 60 NCSC staff, many of them are structural engineers, surveyors. These are professionals. Is it really possible to replace them with AI or technology? I do have some reservations. Secretary, I want to know if you have explored that with the department. Now, in general, of course, my take is that whilst directing departments to cut spending or establishment by 2%, you should also make sure that public service is not affected, and they should not slash positions just for the sake of it. Thank you, Chair. Now, for government departments, they are required to set work priorities. It's for them to decide which approach to take to finish their work, say for inspection. They may take a risk-based approach, and that means for places with high risk, they will step up the frequency of inspection and vice versa, or they can even things out. Now, by adopting technology solutions, they can conduct more detailed analysis under the risk-based approach so that with less manpower they can do the same amount of work or even more in a more precise manner. So I believe that this is the trend for government departments. They do keep in view the manpower needs and the availability of tech solutions. If resources eventually become available, these departments may hire NCSC staff again, and is that a waste of resources? Now let me answer Mr. Lam's question. We provide flexibility in the resource allocation exercise. Meanwhile, if there is a need for additional resources to cope with increasing workload, they can apply under the central mechanism for additional resources without waiting for another fiscal year to begin. And indeed, we often receive these applications in the middle of the year. As for the use of resources and manpower deployment, it really depends on the work plans of the respective departments. It's really difficult for me to explain on behalf of the buildings department their work. So I want to explain that it has nothing to do with the mechanism itself. There is nothing that stops the relevant departments in applying for resources before the end of the fiscal year. It really depends on the work plans of the respective departments and whether there is a need to apply for resources under the central allocation mechanism. And as I explained a number of times, in terms of resource allocation, there are envelopes. There is a controlling officer under the secretary. We have an umbrella of departments, and if need be, resources can be redeployed from one unit to another under the same umbrella. Right, let's see if there are other questions from members for this item. If not, then that's the end for this item. Thank you, Secretary and your team, for coming. Let's move on to the next item. Any other business? Nothing under AOB. Meeting's adjourned.